I ultimately believe the best businesses out there didn't really care about the business model. AI is not good enough to provide exceptional outputs by itself. You could say that RevOps somehow has failed in some aspects, but serve them to say, hey, it's not our software's fault. You need this GTM engineer. But actually, I don't know if you're noticing now, they're slightly moving away from it. Some companies have a great top of funnel approach, but can't really scale it. Let's find our actual dream 200 or 1,000 accounts and let's do the unscalable for that. Just coming up with an offer that people feel stupid to say no to.
Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate it. We've been in touch for quite a while, I would say, and today it's all about GTM. So what is go-to-market engineering? What do you guys do at workflows.io? So I would be really interested in your journey as well. I think your LinkedIn followers as well. So maybe just introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, so I'm Dan Rosenthal. I'm the co-founder of a company called workflows.io, and we're mainly helping tech companies, B2B tech companies, usually from seed to Series B, with their sales and marketing across outbound content and then the RevOps system to glue it all together.
How do you actually do that? Like what, not the secret sauce, but what is your USP at workflows.io?
The USP is kind of like, I guess, why we called the company Workflows. There's a lot of agencies who will do everything in a black box. You might have an ads agency who runs some meta ads for you, but it's like, it's not integrated into your system. Your team isn't necessarily the ones following up. Maybe they're the ones like following up with the leads, but then you don't own the system whatsoever. So if you decide to churn from, working with them, then you lose all the progress. And it's a black box. Same thing happens if you have like an email outreach agency. So our USP is we will plug into your system, plug into your CRM. Everything will be on your software. And if you ever decide to stop working with us, your team can just take over. And so it's like real progress on building out your GTM rather than like trying to spoon feed them leads that they're not going to get without us.
Do you feel that's kind of a superior business model, or why did you decide to go that path?
Actually, from a business model perspective, you could perhaps argue that it's less superior because, if a customer is reliant on you, then they might stay longer. But at the same time, part of the reason I wanted to start Workflows in the way I did is like I'm just really focused on value, and I ultimately believe like the best businesses out there didn't really care about like the business model and necessarily extracting the most capital from their customers, and rather providing like long-term value and sustained value. So if it's more valuable for the customer, I think in some way, shape, or form, it's going to pay dividends and help my business in the long term. But like technically, let's say as a business model, you could consider it less superior because it's easier for them to stop working with you.
Yeah, absolutely. When you first announced that you started workflows.io, I think you called it service as a software, not software as a service. So where does the difference come from? How do you define service as a software? Is it the workflows bit that you talked about?
Yeah, I mean, look, that is the ideal outcome, and ultimately we're using services as a way to build our dream way of running the business. So I will be completely honest in saying that isn't fully realized yet, but we're making strides there. But service as a software is essentially, okay, you have service businesses out there now who are becoming very AI enhanced. They're building lots of automations. Their teams are, relying on these agents that help them deliver more per person. And then you have like software and SaaS companies out there who actually are building service and agency arms. Like a lot of companies out there, their onboardings are like getting crazier and crazier to the point where it's borderline a service. Some of them call it like solutions, the solutions team, or obviously like customer success. And there is so much human intervention in there that I think like they're treading on the whole service thing. But obviously there's like a software, outcome there. I think services as software is essentially living in that middle ground, accepting that middle ground, and saying, okay, we are going to deliver services, but we're going to do it in a software fashion, and there's going to be some software elements to it. So how that would, for each of my services, that would be a little bit of a different an experience for the customer, but ultimately it's like a software-like experience where you're getting services. So on the front end, there will be some way of seeing what's going on, whether that be analytics or actually like interacting with the system. And on the back end, we're going to be heavily led by our internal automations and systems and agents. And so that combination of on the back end, being very reliant on tech and our internal tech, and on the front end, having some sort of custom software, I believe you are in that middle ground. But we believe that AI right now, and this actually might change. So who knows how good this model is going to be in the long term? But I hand on heart believe this right now. AI is not good enough to provide exceptional outputs by itself, but I believe an AI plus a human with a human in the loop is able to provide exceptional outputs at much less time. And so that's what I'm betting on in workflows. And I know you're thinking about similar things.
Yeah, absolutely. You show all these tools right on LinkedIn, different kind of tech stacks, etc., etc. I'm wondering, is that the secret sauce, or is it how you use the tools and leverage them, which is then the secret sauce for organizations on how they leverage the tools, not what tools they leverage?
100%. Well, look, we can keep beating the horn of Clay, and everyone doesn't shut up about it. But realistically, Clay is one of the main pieces of tech, at least for our RevOps and outbound services. Um, Clay is like a very special tool where it's a canvas. And so someone could use it for like a basic list enrichment, and that is like using 10% of its capabilities in a valid use case. But you can really go crazy with Clay. You could, call any custom API. You can grab data from any different source. You can transform data at scale with AI. So the possibilities of what you can do are really endless. And I'm not trying to like sit here and say, Clay's the be all end all. We also use a lot of N8N. It's just like the speed of iteration and creating workflows on Clay does tend to be a bit quicker than N8N. What a lot of people do is build something on Clay. Once it's proven, you can transition it over to N8N, and it has better, cost structure, and sometimes it can even be more robust. But I'd say like Clay is at the epicenter of at least the RevOps and outbound service. But there is a huge difference between how an amateur uses Clay and some of the stuff that we're building, which we could even go into. Like I haven't even seen some people building the type of stuff that we build on Clay. So it really is a canvas for your creativity.
When you talk about the other different services, for example, cold email outreach, etc., can you give us maybe like your top 5 tools per niche or application that you use on a daily basis?
For sure. So let's say, let's say cold email. Definitely Clay. It really depends on the niche in terms of which data provider we use. So that's where I say we really use a bunch of different tools. Like, we have some clients who reach out to e-commerce. So like store leads and actually brand navigator. And even for very specific e-commerce brands, like we've been actually testing out Exa.ai, which I don't love their scalability, but the output quality is actually phenomenal in Exa. If we have a client reaching out to a local business, we're using Serper and, custom workflows there. OpenMart is pretty decent as well. And then like, obviously if you're reaching out to, let's say a more new school type of business who's on LinkedIn, you've got LinkedIn Sales Nav, and you've got all the tools that obviously like take their data, like Apollo and stuff. So like list building really is a bunch of different tools, but if I had to choose one, I'd probably just say Sales Navigator itself, because we have some ways of utilizing that data. Into Clay, in Clay, we use, I'd say our number one email finder, where we can take leads from, for example, Apollo and find much more emails is Find Email, but there's some other great ones out there. And we often loop in, and this is one of the USPs of why I like doing the things the way we do them, because we sync into your CRM, everything's on your systems. We always score our leads, and the tier 1 leads get cold called from your team, or our clients' teams. So we use like Better Contact to find the phone numbers there.
Have you used Freckle for the CRM specifically, like HubSpot, for example?
Freckle is a great tool for CRM enrichment specifically. I mean, they are actually going to be going after the larger market, but I think they're hyper focused on CRM enrichment right now. And I think as like a challenger brand to Clay, I think it's smart to focus on a specific use case and actually build a functionality there. So excited to see what they're building. So yeah, Freckle, we are utilizing CRM enrichment projects, but that's more on the RevOps side of things. For outbound, Clay is still the tool of choice. And then instantly, I'd say N8N, but that's the one part that we still have our own systems on. So we do have some N8N automations to help our team deliver the service, like basically grabbing the data and automatically analyzing it from instantly. It's just a webhook that we pull into our N8N. So I'd say Sales Nav, Find Email, Clay, instantly, N8N. Those are my 5 for email, and I just switch out HeyReach for instantly if I was doing LinkedIn.
I see. And then for the topic of lead generation, right, when you look for specific data sources, it probably depends on the business as well, right? If we talk about e-com, etc., like what are your go-to data sources?
Yeah, so there's a tool that I really like called Disco Like that basically he has some crazy method. I don't even know how this is possible. He almost has like every website on the internet in his database. He pulls
Mm.
every SSL certificate. So I guess like not every website has an SSL certificate, but like any serious business will. And he basically developed his own, like, let's say lightweight AI model that is able to just read and basically apply logic to all the website content that he's pulling into his database. And so to find lookalikes, we've been finding it crazy good because you could actually use it for local business. You could use it for very niche industries. So I'd say if we're really serious about building out a TAM, Disco Like is always in the stack, and it can actually be used in any industry. So I'd say like Disco Like is our Swiss Army knife, but as I said, for ecom, you have like Sales Nav. One of our clients is reaching out to property owners, like small property owners. So we're using Serper there, and also
Mhm.
scraping, like Booking.com and stuff like that. So that's custom scraping. Apify is good for a lot of that custom scraping. So Apify, is part of that stack. What else is there? There's if you're reaching out to influencers, there's a great tool called influencers.club where they pull all the different influencers from many different niches and like have a really clean database. And so if you ever, for whatever reason, reaching out to influencers, those campaigns absolutely crush because they're obviously super open to brand deals. So you can get
Mhm.
insane results on those types of campaigns. What else is there? If there's US based businesses who are reaching out to like construction companies, development companies. There's a tool called shovels.ai, really niche, but like very good for, like contract permits and finding contractor companies. What else is there? There's actually for a lot of companies, we scrape like industry directories. So, for example, for one of our clients, they reach out to distributors. There's like 70 different distributor directories, and maybe 50 of those we were able to scrape. So we basically shortlisted all of those directories and scraped them, and that helped us create like one of the most thorough TAM apps I've ever been able to create. There's probably some that I'm missing right now, but you could even test me if there's like a industry that you're having trouble scraping, and I'll tell or grabbing companies for, and I can tell you maybe how we go about it. But I know you with your engineering background, you're probably even building crazier custom scrapes than we are.
And we do some custom scraping. I would be interested in something you just mentioned, which is the TAM modeling aspect, right? So how would you actually go about modeling a TAM, so the total addressable market, if someone doesn't understand TAM? How would you break down the problem? Like, let's say a customer comes to you. How would you make sure you define first the TAM, right, as maybe kind of a circle, and then make sure you identify blind spots to help the client find new leads, potential leads, and maybe even make the circle, the TAM, a little bit bigger, right?
I'd actually be curious to see how you do it as well. But I'll break down our process and you can let me know what you think. So, first of all, I think
Yeah.
like grabbing the TAM in some ways isn't the hard part. It's about like figuring out your SAM or your SOM or however you want to call it, or basically your ICP within that
Mhm.
TAM.
Yeah.
Because ultimately you need to find a lot of data. You need to apply some logic to it that actually makes sense to find who's your ICP in that TAM. But if a client comes to us and wants to build out a TAM, typically I actually do that with like basically a machine gun approach. I will go beyond like what could be their TAM to find as many companies as possible. Like one of our clients, they want us to reach out to management software. So essentially software that usually like local businesses use to manage their business. Well, like there's no great way to find that, with typical filters because it actually requires like looking at their website and evaluating that. So we went ahead and basically just scraped a bunch of software companies that could be management software companies from a bunch of different sources. We use like Disco, like Ocean, Apollo there, and just combined it all. That ended up being like 150,000 companies just in the UK, and then we condensed that down to what ended up being under 10,000. So, I really believe in a machine gun approach, and then finding the quality companies from there. Otherwise, there is no exact way to like to list build and capture a whole TAM. Like I could probably do some very defined searches, but I wouldn't capture the whole TAM. So I really believe like you have to be a bit more broad. But then what I think is the key here is account research at scale, scoring and qualifying that TAM. So we believe in a back tested approach. So I actually talked about this yesterday, so it's fresh on my mind. So I like doing things in a tier one, tier two, tier three method. Maybe as an engineer, you prefer like a scoring model because it's a bit more predictable. But I found, and also because I was a sales rep, is a lot of scoring models end up not being used because, you know, what is an 86 like? And because there's so many different factors to how those scores are typically generated, people don't actually like view it with merit. Whereas if you simplify it to tier one, tier two, tier three, sometimes tier four, and you do it in a way that's back tested, and I'll explain what that means, you begin to look at that value like, okay, tier one equals money. And here's why. Because if you have, let's say, 100,000 companies in your TAM, tier one in your model should be around like, let's say 10, maybe 20% of that TAM, because like ultimately you want to be slicing out your ICP segment. Tier two maybe is like 30 to 40. Tier three is another 30 to 40%. So not like a normal distribution. It should be skewed towards the lower end of your tiering model. That you should design it that way. Now, if you analyze your close one, you should have a much higher distribution of tier one. You should have 30, 40% plus tier one, which means you need to design your model in a way they have outsized distribution in your close one and your clients, and a much lower distribution in your TAM. And that's when you found the differential of like what actually makes someone a great customer. If you find that difference in skew between your customers and the TAM, if that makes sense.
Does the problem also start in your case, or in your cases when the customer comes to you, they don't even have a clear definition of the ICP? I think this is where the problem starts, right? They don't actually know who they're targeting. Do you help them with this as well, like ICP definition?
100%. Well, one thing to note is this approach that I'll say right now works better for bigger companies, because when you're a small company, you also want to make assumptions about your ICP who might not be your current client base and go after them. But let's say you actually have a decent client base, but you don't really know who's your ICP. We would essentially download all the closed won, sometimes closed loss, and people who didn't follow through with the deal as well. But download all your closed won with their ACV, how long they've their LTV, how long they've been working with you, how much money they've spent with you. And you essentially want to put that into a tool like Clay, or you could even use Claude Code to research all of those companies and see the commonalities amongst them. Like one of our clients thought that a subset of sub-industries was their ICP, but when we looked at their closed won, they were right about half of them. Half of them were like barely shown in their closed won. So ultimately, like the data doesn't lie, but you have to have a significant amount of data for that to end up, actually having like significant statistical significance there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now let's talk a little bit about the rise of the GTM engineer, whatever that means, right? So maybe we first define what does go-to-market engineering look like? How did it, or where did it come from? I think Clay coined that term, right? And what does it actually mean? And do you think that's a little bit of a hype, like because everybody now talks about GTME?
Yeah, I mean, it is a bit of a hype and it isn't. One thing I'll say is RevOps came about. I mean, maybe like it started really becoming popular like 5 years ago or something like that. And that was essentially solving a very similar problem than GTME is starting. You could say that RevOps somehow has failed in some aspects, because basically when I speak to a RevOps person, maybe 10, 20% of the time, they're phenomenal. They are like the person leading the charge in their org. They're doing so many different things, but a lot of times I speak to them and they're very much like almost like an offshoot of IT team for business departments, where they're just like solving CRM issues, managing data flows, but ultimately they're not like strategic in growth. I feel that GTM engineering has this like inherent connection to being strategic and helping with growth, which is ultimately like what RevOps should be, and maybe has failed in a lot of cases to be. So like you could argue that, this focus on GTM engineering, actually has merit. But at the same time, there's been RevOps, there's also been growth, which is like has been around for much longer than RevOps. There was even growth hacking like 10 plus years ago. And that was always like this cross-functional person who's doing experiments and like really trying to push the boundaries to grow a company. So I wouldn't say it's a new thing. And Clay definitely served them, to basically their software. I think it's overhyped how hard it is, but ultimately the reason it might be hard is because you need really both a good like business acumen to use it, and you need some like relatively decent technical skills. I mean, not anywhere near like a coding solution or even like N8N, which is pretty low code. I still think it's pretty easy to use, but I think because it requires like a few different skills and a few different faculties, it's maybe a bit difficult for people to use. So it served them to say, hey, it's not our software's fault. You need this GTM engineer. But actually, I don't know if you're noticing now, they're slightly moving away from it because they want to go to enterprise, and enterprise doesn't want to like hire a specific job title just to use a software. They want software that empowers their current team. So I do think Clay is maybe moving away from it because it served them until it started to not serve them.
Yeah.
Is it overhyped? I would say, I'd say yes, actually. I mean, you're like a real GTM engineer because you're actually an engineer, and we actually have some actual engineers on our team who are GTM engineers, and they think through things differently. And we have people who are more businessy who are teaching the technical skills. So ultimately, if you're really being technical about it, you should have like a very technical background, and you're applying that to solve the problems of GTM to be like a true GTM engineer. But it serves us to also play into the hype.
Yeah. How would you categorize the biggest problems of companies that you talk to? Is it always a lead gen problem, or are there companies that do not have a lead gen problem, but maybe like a GTM problem, for example, right? How would you categorize the problems? And do you think it's always lead gen that's at the very top? Because I think almost everybody we talk to has a lead gen problem.
Well, some companies actually have a great top of funnel approach, but can't really scale it. So there's sometimes scalability issues. Like one of our clients reaches out to very traditional industries who don't respond on email or LinkedIn, but they book so many calls via cold calling and via events. To actually scale that to your entire market, to be systematically cold calling people at the right time is actually like a big technical issue. So they are booking a lot of meetings, but we help them unlock some of their issues of like no ad hoc list building, mapping out their TAM, tracking signals, having everything be in the CRM so that their reps need to waste less time on manual research, and we're able to basically like focus on what they did best, which was just like starting conversations. And because we help them unlock that, it solved will improve their lead gen, but maybe they didn't have like a problem to solve to start with. So there is obviously like companies that have good lead gen but need efficiency gains. There's companies that like are terrible at it, just rely on inbound and referrals. And then there's like the hyper scale ups of the world. I don't know if you're working with like Lovable. I'm sure Lovable doesn't have a lead gen problem, but maybe they have a problem of like, okay, we get probably thousands of signups per day. They obviously want to work with more enterprise companies. I mean, they don't want to be B2C forever as well. I'm sure Lovable would love to be like internal software builder for enterprises, but it's like, okay, maybe they have a problem. Like, how do we recognize these bigger enterprise deals from our thousands of signups? So I think there is different types of problems, but generally speaking, the types of businesses that might come to you or me, a lot of them will have a lead gen problem and are trying to solve it in any way they can.
I have another question, which is when people come to you, do you think there's a kind of a misconception about GTM or the whole topic, the whole spiel around AI? Like people maybe overestimate AI too much of what it can do. For example, for TAM modeling purposes, right? Do you sometimes have that as well, where people come to you and say, "Hey, by the way, you guys are the magic pill. You're going to solve everything for us," and maybe with a misconception?
Yeah, I mean, we're working with like tech companies, VC funded tech companies. So they are actually pretty savvy, and they've actually used AI in their own efforts before. So a lot of them actually know the limitations. I would say I've talked to more traditional businesses, and they want to build like this super agent that does everything for them, and those what's definitely overestimate what AI can do. But I'd say our ICP, which is like we're trying to work with very tech forward teams anyways, do actually understand the limitations of it. One thing that they don't understand, which I have a very thorough understanding of, and I'm curious to get your thoughts. Like we're doing a lot of research at scale, usually with Claygent. We have to use the 4.0 mini model most of the time because the other ones are simply not cost scalable. So that's one thing that I think companies may not realize is like how expensive it is to use AI on a big data set. And that's something that I'm very thoroughly involved with.
That's super interesting. How is there more to AI than apart from Claygen, for example? What other AI tools are you using? I mean, you mentioned low code N8N, right? But are there any other tools that use like real AI, not just linear regression or some kind of?
I mean, there's a lot of cool tools right now. Like because we're focused on our service, we are in the GTM space, and so I mean, there's ClayGen, but there's also like building, your custom AI automations that take really interesting data from different places. I mean, like one thing we built recently was AI lifecycle emails, so personalized onboarding emails for customers of the software product based on like what they were doing and custom research about them. So I think there's like lots of things you can do in a tool like Clay or N8N that is, like AI automations or AI agents. But I think the coolest AI products I'm seeing right now are basically the vertical AI software. Like one cool one that we don't use at all, but I think is blowing up because they solve a real problem is Elise AI. They're building AI for basically like property management companies that get tons of calls and queries all day, and it solves like 90% of that work. Because they chose like a very specific vertical that they're building for, they were able to actually like productionalize AI agents very adequately. But I think, a lot of these, like let's say more broad AI tools, like even, your N8Ns and relevance AI, to build like a true AI application that eliminates a bunch of manual work, you have to spend so much time fine tuning it, building RAG, all this stuff to make it really defined. So that's why I do think the most impressive use cases of AI are probably like the vertical AI solutions right now that are solving very specific problems.
Absolutely. What is the case study that you're most proud of that you can maybe talk about how you solve a specific problem for a customer?
We've been around for 3 months now, so we're releasing our first like proper case studies, but just the ones that are listed on our website. One of our clients, we helped them generate a bunch of new business just by doing what they were doing well over ads and just scaling that over email and reaching out to their entire market. So we helped them generate over 1 million in pipeline very quickly, just because they were basically having a bunch of success with agencies. We pulled every single agency out there and we're emailing them at scale, sending them like a 2-step sequence every 3 months. Right now we're going around and recycling them. So that just provide like an amazing result for a client. But my most proud case studies are the ones that are coming out right now because we've been working for them for longer. And yeah, I'd say the proudest one is coming out. They had a sales team of 8, and we're just like completely overhauling their efficiency. And yeah, it's what I talked about earlier. They were having great success with cold calling, but we basically systemized it, operationalized it, and it just boosted their efficiency a lot.
Can you be more specific then? Like, how do you operationalize, for example, cold email outreach and cold calling, right? I mean, for cold emailing, for example, I know that you're a big advocate of like building the right email infrastructure to make sure the email actually arrives in the inbox, right? So can you give the audience some tips of how to set up how to systemize cold calling as well as cold emailing?
Yeah, so cold emailing, it really depends on your TAM size. I think if you have a TAM of under 10,000 accounts, which is a lot of companies, like, and let's not say TAM, let's say SAM, like people you can actually serve as customers, not like idealized potential customers, like people who your product is adequately valuable for right now that they will actually give you their money. A lot of companies have a TAM of under 10,000. So for those companies, I wouldn't think about it as like, let's just like reach out to everyone. I would think about it, okay, let's find our actual dream 200 or 1,000 accounts and let's do the unscalable for them. So I really believe in old school. One of my clients who has a massive TAM, he has a very specific part of his TAM that is actually his dream account. So I'm advising them on how we can do a custom gift campaign and like make a boom on social media. So I do believe sometimes you have to do the unscalable to get, especially if like they're really enterprise or like hyper growth companies. You might have to get creative. Okay, so let's say you have 10,000 companies. You want to figure out who you're going to do one-to-many plays with, who you're going to do one-to-few plays with. So maybe people who you email and cold call. something like that, or maybe you are manually emailing them. And then your tier threes, that's where you can maybe do like the proper one to many plays, like instantly reaching out to all of them. So that's how I believe you should do it. If you have a small TAM, if you have a big TAM, I believe the goal is kind of, there's a GTM guy called Taylor Heron, and I really believe what he says. If you have a massive TAM, your goal is to basically send them one, maybe two emails every 2 to 3 months. Like that is your goal. And if they say no, obviously they're opted out. But like it is your duty, if you actually have a problem that you can help them solve, to let them know that you exist every 2 to 3 months with a non-annoying, value-driven, well-researched email. And so the game is very different there. It's about like data at scale and just like setting them to instantly with the right segmentation and copy. So a lot of companies that we're working with are actually more ABM style. Some are more like volume driven. So, but I really believe it's two completely different approaches. And then for calling, the reps are usually working out of like HubSpot or to like Outreach or SalesLoft. And so if you survey these teams, they will almost always tell you that most of their time is spending, like very few teams do all the list building for their SDRs. So their SDRs usually have a sales nav license and they're manually building lists, downloading some sort of CSV, putting it into like a Lucia or something like that, grabbing the phone number, researching each person before they pick up the phone and call. So what I mean operationalize it, I mean, okay, let's do all of that for the person. If I'm a rep, I want to go into, I believe like the most simple approach is probably just doing this all in like HubSpot. I want to have ideally, and this is like maybe the level two, I want to have a task every day with who is showing signal in my market. I want to have an AI summary of exactly what they do. I want to have their phone number. I want to have the stakeholder map. And I just want all the research done for me so I can just pick up the phone and call. That's like the ideal scenario, and actually getting there is super difficult. So from a technical perspective, you want to map out their TAM, score it, upload it to the CRM with all the enrichment data stored as properties. Then you want to track every single signal that's relevant to the company. We leverage custom events in HubSpot, so you see in the activity log. We also do monthly account digests that live in notes that basically look at all the activity and summarize everything that's going on with an account in the notes section. And so whenever a good signal comes through, that is what creates the task and what assigns the account to the rep. So that's how you end up with the end state of like, you don't even have to look at lists. You can just like look at your tasks. But like ideally, I still want a list on my CRM with all the research done for me with the, with the phone numbers, so that all I could focus on is calling. And then you can like combine some of those systems. And so if you're uploading stuff to the CRM and you use a tool like Outbound Sync, which is syncing instantly or smartly to HubSpot, you could say, okay, if the company or person is tier one and we sent them an email, then create a cold call task. So that's maybe like your more one to few type plays. But that is kind of the stuff that we're doing here. So it's not just about like being great at outreach. It's also about like how do we systemize it so that you're also making the most of like automation and human intervention.
Yeah. What do you think are the playbooks for email that work really well? Of course, it depends on the industry, right? But how would you write a cold email? And what are people doing wrong nowadays?
Okay. I also split this into two categories. I think there's services, which is just a very different approach, and technology or products. So if you're in services, it's really about creating an amazing offer. And honestly, I think like with services, if I really wanted to land a deal with, let's say, a tech company, I'd probably not even automate anything. I'd probably just like analyze the heck out of them, film a loom, and send them a personalized loom. Like realistically, if I really wanted to break into an account. But if you're doing it at scale, just coming up with an offer that people feel stupid to say no to, Alex Hormozzi style. I believe on the services side, the offer is really important. Now on the tech side, technically the offer is usually okay. If you have a free trial, that can actually work really well. One of our clients has a PLG software, and we're driving a bunch of signups for them, and that's the main CTA, is like a free trial with extra credits essentially to use the product. So there's an offer there. But if you're sales led, really the offer is like a demo. Let me show you what's up here. Sometimes you can get creative and think of like very specific things you can do for someone. But because we're focused on technology, I feel like it's really just about understanding the persona, really speaking their language. I find that is like so important. A lot of people say write like a sixth grader. But I don't know if I agree with that. Like, I want to write like the language that my target persona uses every day. Like when we reach out to
Yeah, correct.
RevOps people, I'm not speaking like a sixth grader. I'm speaking like a RevOps person.
Exactly.
So I believe it's like writing to your persona, and because you're ultimately selling tech to do something better, like smarter, better, faster, you have to adequately explain that. And so again, people always talk about like super short emails, but sometimes like longer emails that really explain what how we solve something differently is good for us. So I'd say on the email side, it's just about really understanding the person, trying to create a good offer. Obviously, deliverability matters. And then on LinkedIn, we're honestly just like conversation, like starting conversations, really short, usually like 2 sentence emails, asking a question, and we're just trying to, see if a problem is relevant to someone ultimately. So
Yeah, that's good tips then. Appreciate it. How do you automate then LinkedIn outreach? Any specific tools that you could recommend? I mean, you mentioned a couple of them, I think, earlier.
yeah, HeyReach is our tool of choice just because the API is
Hmm.
super strong and it's affordable. The other one that people use a lot is Lemlist, but I find that is more suited if you're trying to, let's say, do multi-channel in one tool. But because
Hmm.
there's some reasons that we really choose Instantly and HeyReach respectively, then we actually focus on like linking those two rather than using a tool like Lemlist.
I see. That makes sense. Did we miss anything else regarding the GTM approach then? I'm not sure. Otherwise, you explained everything pretty much in detail. I'm not sure if we missed anything. Um, any other thoughts, ideas, maybe misconceptions you want to talk about?
The last thing I could talk about in general is like we talked a lot about outreach, but ultimately, I believe the fastest growing brands in the world and the biggest brands in the world, they all have something called brand. And so when you have a brand, outreach also gets way more effective. So this is
Hmm.
my fundamental belief, though, is that ultimately want to be doing GTM in a holistic way where we're playing to a company's strengths and also ultimately building out their brand in the way that we do things. So with workflows, I think we're doing pretty good 3 months in of a brand, but ultimately like so far to go. And at this early stage, it can be tough to build you know, a, a brand quickly. So I think that solving the problems that your client solves for free through content is still the ultimate way to go to market. It's just a longer term play. Like realistically, if I need to drive results in 2 months, I'd probably still go with outreach, but I still believe content is king. And then if you have great content, you can scale those into ads, run outreach to people, and then both will perform way better. So that's why I also offer content as a service. You know best. You've got like 5 times the amount of followers than me, so I'm sure you believe the same, but it's harder. It's also harder to,
Definitely.
like everyone has their unique approach with content. Like you can't really templatize it in some ways as much, but trying to figure that out as well with our content service.
Yeah, but I think you guys are doing a really great job. I really enjoy your posts as well, like from Workflows.io. And I think it's Hormozy's belief, right, that you just give away everything for free and then people will come eventually to you anyway. So, but as you said, it's kind of a marathon, not really a sprint.
I mean, I'd love to ask you a question though. I mean, you have a crazy following. I think you do a good job of like you have an engineering background. I think like your main USP is you make something very technical, exciting and digestible and snackable. And I think that from my perspective, that's what you do really well. But like you have an insane following. What are your thoughts around that?
I share the same beliefs that you do. I've been doing it for like 4 or 5 years, something like that, just posting every single day. Something little, a small update, an article, whatever it is, just ship every day is my philosophy. Like whatever it is, yeah, just ship one piece every single day. If it's a piece of software, internal workflow, recording a training for employees, something, right? But the following itself is just a long-term game. It's a marathon. So there's not really a hack or a trick or a coaching that will solve that for you. And we also tell that to clients, right? Sometimes the clients really think just because I have a huge following, I've built it overnight. It took me 4 or 5 years every single day to post something to get to
I want to ask
170K.
you a bit more questions. This is also useful for me. I mean, when I
Sure.
tell my team and is like, I'd rather have you post 1 to 2 bangers a week than 5 average posts because ultimately, I
It's
actually
true.
built my following. When I started Workflows, I had 24K followers. That was quite literally most weeks posting 1 time a week, sometimes two. But
Hmm.
each post I put like my absolute heart into. Some posts took me more than 10 hours, all the work behind it, and then like another 40 hours to learn the thing maybe that I was posting about. So insane amount of work per post, but that ultimately grew my profile. But then you have some people who are like consistency is everything, and maybe they have better results than me. But how do you balance like consistency and ultimately, like, when people see your name, I think that they should be like, okay, let me stop and read this. Whereas if you force yourself to post every day and sometimes you don't have good things to say, then people, every time someone reads a post that they don't think is that good from you, I feel like it makes them less likely to read the next one. But I mean, you've kept it up, so I don't know. What are your thoughts there?
A really smart question. I like that. And you might have seen, if you go to my LinkedIn profile, I do not post consistently anymore. Like going from, I don't know, 10 times a week or so in the early beginnings, maybe 3 to 4 times a week. So I'm not posting every day anymore. Maybe I write an article here and there of a problem that I solve or that we solve for a client. So it has to be timely, right? But exactly what you said, I've just scaled it all the way up to 150K. And then I started to slow down my output process to actually deliver quality rather than quantity. So that was a very good question.
Yeah, I mean, so if someone was like trying to grow their following, I mean, on LinkedIn or YouTube or X, and maybe these have very different approaches, but let's say LinkedIn, where you have your following and I have mine, would you advise them to post every day, or
To begin with, yes, every single day, and then you basically find your niche, so to speak, right? And then you can double down on that niche or what people react to. And then if a post goes viral, you run ads on that post, etc., etc. You know the spiel.
yes, okay, you believe people need to basically like try many different things, and once you find that thing, it becomes less important to post every day.
Exactly, because in the beginning I was posting about like just physics stuff, and then it became engineering, and then became physics plus AI, and now it's more like physics AI that I post about, or stuff that we solve internally with workflows in sales and marketing. This is kind of my USP. And then obviously I'm an engineer, so people would probably trust my posts more than someone who is just a copy paste agency who uses an N8N template and installs it in your organization. So we have that USP, luckily.
Yeah. I mean, man, I've got questions for you, but maybe we need to do this again where I'm interviewing you.
Yeah. You have your own YouTube channel. I saw the last interview you posted was really cool. I liked that a lot.
Yeah, come to Barcelona. We'll do it in the same studio if you want.
That would be cool. That would be cool.
I know you just haven't had a kid, so maybe that's not going to happen. But
Yeah, we can do that relatively soon, as you like. We can discuss this after the podcast.
yes, and congrats on the newborn.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Dan. Have a good one.
Cool. Thanks, Joseph. Bye bye.